A lot of narratives that we're tracking. From Rachel Maddow, they're going big on this whole Ebola pandemic prevention narrative. Apparently, measles is back and the bird flu. We're going to see a repeat COVID 2.0, all that lovely narrative jazz. Let's roll the trigger warning MSNBC clip, Rachel Maddow talking about Ebola.
None of this is true. Public health experts, including current and former USAID officials, say that the Ebola prevention efforts were hobbled, that they've not been restarted. In 2014, you might remember there was an outbreak of Ebola in West Africa. Doctors from the United States went to countries like Guinea to go track cases and treat patients. A doctor named Craig Spencer was one of those doctors who responded to that outbreak, and he became the first person in New York City to test positive himself for Ebola in October 2014 after he was abroad treating Ebola patients in Guinea with Doctors Without Borders. Ebola has a really high mortality rate. It kills more than half the people it infects. In Dr. Spencer's case, he had 19 days in the hospital, but he survived. Today, he wrote this in response to Elon Musk's remarks about Ebola prevention being accidentally stopped, but then started back up again with no interruption. He said, quote, on January 29th this year, Uganda reported an Ebola outbreak. Normally, the U.S. would have quickly sent one of our Ebola experts to help the response. But this time we didn't, because we couldn't, because this administration wouldn't let them go right when this outbreak was declared. Normally, the U.S. would have helped set up border screening and other measures on the ground, but this time we didn't. Normally, we would have spoken with the WHO about helping end the outbreak, but this time we didn't because CDC staff weren't even allowed to talk to them.
And just very recently, hundreds of CDC workers, those frontline doctors and epidemiologists who would be responding to outbreaks like Ebola abroad, Ebola in the United States, and other infectious threats that you just highlighted, 750 of those people were let go. Regardless of what Elon Musk and others say, we have set ourselves up to be very sorry for an infectious threat. Maybe next week, maybe next month, maybe next year. But I've been saying over and over again, we will regret this.
You always love that predictive programming, or I guess I should say fear-mongering, over the next pandemic, right? The, 1 in 100-year pandemic that seems to happen, every now 10 years, 10 days really at this rate. But I want to drill down on this for a second because Rachel Maddow dedicated her entire show last night to the idea of Ebola prevention gone amok, gone amiss because of the actions by Doge. Now, Rachel Maddow, I tell you to fire your staff because they, again, have had you spread fake news, but I think they've already been laid off amidst all the cuts. Though, hey, I guess unlike Doge, MSNBC wasn't even actually nice enough to give them the chance to give an email with the five things that they had done. They just got the axe, but I guess maybe they can walk out the door with Joy Reid. Much prefer that version of Joy than Kamala Harris's iteration of it. But speaking of things that I guess probably make you want to throw up, I guess that is Ebola. But there's something quite interesting there, right? The idea that we're deviating from the normal consensus of how we would respond to Ebola outbreaks. Well, not to make everything about Hunter Biden, but I want to show you the grift that is USAID, that is DARPA, that frankly is Ebola prevention. Or I guess racket would be a better explanation. Because the company that was responsible for responding to the 2014 Ebola outbreak was a company that you guys, this audience, may be very well aware of called Metabiota. Now, you may know it off the top of your head because it was the company that set up the weird biolabs in Ukraine, but more precisely, because it was a company that received millions of dollars from none other than Hunter Biden and the offshoot of his firm, Rosemont Seneca Partners, known as Rosemont Seneca Technology Partners, and to the tune of $30 million in their first round of funding. I believe one of their board seats was someone who was also from Hunter Biden RSTP world. Now, as you can see on screen right there, this company was tasked with, like I said, responding to the Ebola outbreak in Africa, and they, quote, bungled the response. It was so bad that the World Health Organization actually had to get involved and say, we want nothing to do with you because you're not tracking samples, you're not doing anything meaningful to stop this outbreak, and we can't even contact you, and you're mixing up and messing up samples. So, Rachel Maddow, if that's what you want business as usual to be, a grift company that's invested quite heavily in by the offspring, the princelings of Democrat politicians who are doing actually nothing substantive on the ground, then yeah, I guess we're happy to deviate away from that. Or should we play the equivalent of, I guess, pathogenic biological Fast and Furious scandal by shipping over not just humanized mice models, but deadly pathogens to Chinese Communist Party run labs like, I don't know, the Wuhan Institute of Virology? Is that what pandemic prevention is to you? Well, apparently it still is, because there's news breaking today that very same lab, the Wuhan Institute of Virology, is now working on a virus using same gain-of-function type manipulations, using the humanized mouse models of a COVID derivative. So these people never learn, right? This is the establishment's modus operandi. They create the problems and then blame us, right? The Inflation Reduction Act, that sure did a lot to reduce inflation. What was it, outperforming by 2 percentage points today? Yeah, we're the experts, trust the experts. We were only off on inflation by what, 2%? Double what the initial projection was. Right? And now all the fear porn over the bird flu and measles, which are frankly on track with the regular rates that we see, but I guess they have to find a way to nag RFK Jr., right? Or how about this, all the coverage on the plane crashes, which we know is happening because of DEI. Complex systems theory don't quite work all that well when the people that you're hiring are not all that intelligent to begin with. But it's funny, I didn't see the mainstream media covering all those food processing centers getting blown up or the weird spike in train derailments, right? It's only when it fits a certain narrative that they're willing to go complete full steam ahead on these completely premeditated narratives. And do you know why they're ramming this down the throat of the American people? Because they are so desperate, lashing out over what President Trump is trying to do to prevent the mass firing and termination of tens of thousands, I think we're at about 20,000 now, federal workers. Right, a new OPM memo coming out just yesterday, sort of the second iteration of the one that launched that initial lawfare with Judge John McConnell up in Rhode Island and Amit Mehta down here in D.C., or rather Ali Khan down in D.C. So all these narratives that you're seeing, the Ebola, the measles, the idea that the airplanes are going to crash, it's all just because they don't want these people to be fired. And you know where they got really touched the Achilles heel, really nervous? The idea that a lot of these federal employees, well, they're actually just dead people who are non-existent to begin with. They really didn't like that one. And do you know what I say? Because I got a little bit of, shall we say, deja vu, or maybe 2020 election PTSD. Maybe we need to send in Doge to audit the voter rolls too. Because I think we have a problem with dead people there as well. And you know how we know we're right? Because anytime you say it, the mainstream media goes in full meltdown mode. And that's how you know that you're over the target. Because last time I checked, the New York Times said, we were the #1 spreader of misinformation for even daring to say that. Like I always note, they never reached out to do a follow-up piece. It's because we were proven right. Raheem